Okay, good afternoon. On behalf of the Sarah Isom Center for Women and Gender Studies here at the University of Mississippi, welcome to today's talk, Boss Yourself, Owning and Evaluating Your Work, which seems appropriate, right, for many of you who are here that are students, especially during midterms, right, and then also as you're thinking about your future professional careers. I want to thank Cynthia Joyce, who's the Assistant Professor of Journalism in the Meeks School of Journalism and New Media, for being the moderator today. She's going to introduce our guests. And I want to thank her in public, right, because she is a ISOM affiliate, and without the support, right, and volunteering that she does, we wouldn't be able to do, right, the things that we accomplish. So in this public forum, and I've said this in private, but in this public forum, I'm going to say, thank you, Cynthia Joyce. You're amazing, and I'm a fan, and you rock. Okay? And speaking of rocking, right, as I said, this is part of Sarah Fest. It's the Sarah Isom Center's annual Arts and Music Festival. There are other things that are happening this week through the 29th, and you can check that out at sarahfest.rocks. So please, right, help me welcome our guests, but before you start clapping, right, I do want to make a comment about the dynamics in the seating ratio right now, that if we were a scale, this side of the room, right, would be tipping really heavy, so I'm thinking, what's going on over here as you're all sort of sitting? That's just my musing, okay? So with that, right, deep thought, okay, I'm going to turn things over and say, help us welcome our guests, okay?
Thank you guys for coming. So can you guys, you can hear, this is probably even too loud. But thanks to Teresa Starkey too, who is one of the reasons behind so many of the awesome events that come to Ole Miss and to Oxford. It's thanks to her and Kevin Cozart and the ISOM Center too, that I don't know how many of you were around for Pride weekend that happened last May, and just a lot of amazing things happen here. So many things. I'm thinking of all the different people who've come to town and performed, and just so many cultural events that happen, and it's because of the small but mighty crew of the ISOM Center. So those guys deserve a big round of applause. So Sarah Fest is just one part of that that's going on all month, but definitely check that out because there's so many great things happening. And this is just one part of it. So now, thank you. I'll introduce these guys. So Dime Entertainment. You guys hopefully picked up a magazine at the front there. DimeEntertainment.com is I called it a startup in the emails, but you just passed your first birthday, I think, very recently. So I'm not sure that startup still applies, but okay. And they, so I have here to my left is Sarah Campbell. She's the marketing rep and born and raised in Pass Christian, recent grad from Southern Miss. No comments from anybody in here. Way too nerdy and enthusiastic about creative advertising campaigns, which is why you'll see her grin ear to ear if you ask her about her job. In her time that's not Dime, she's either traveling with her husband to be hound dog and a hedgehog, wedding planning, or drinking an iced coffee while plotting her next escape to explore the world. And then Jacqueline Lee, who goes by Jackie, has worked as a real estate agent, a nonprofit coordinator, marketing consultant, festival planner, and a maid over the last 4 years. And that last one will be the one I ask you about first, probably. Provides consulting to the Mississippi Main Street Association and loves spending time in historic downtown districts across the country. I wanted to read you all the mission statement, or part of the mission statement of Dime, because this really caught my eye when I was looking at the magazine and really digging into this, especially the online part. Scrap what you've read about Mississippi, the published stats and other downers. Our state is a rich one, not in currency, but in culture. The true Deep South, and Mississippi in particular, is drenched with artistic talent thicker than our humidity and a personality bigger than our hairdos. Dime is here to tell the colorful, loud, and sometimes twisted and bruised stories behind what makes us laugh, cry, dance, sweat, and drool. We publish this intel the old-fashioned way, on real paper with real ink, and we deliver it for your convenience to beloved local bars, music venues, coffee shops, and other proper places to pass the time. I like that you put the proper places to pass time. Give a check. So my first question that I'll direct to Jackie as the editor, I was telling her in a previous conversation that when I was young, by which I mean pre-internet young, in the late 80s and early 90s, there was a thing that was referred to sometimes as a zine revolution. There was a lot of self-publishing that was happening in print, and you could walk into bars and bookstores and any place where they sort of traffic in culture, and you could find dozens and dozens of magazines that were equally visually arresting as Dime is. And they filled all kinds of just very particular niches. And I think the internet actually absorbed a lot of that self-publishing energy. In the late 90s and then early 2000s, blogs became kind of where all that energy went, right? So there were fewer of these kind of self-published things around. So when I saw this, I was so excited because I thought, oh my gosh, this kind of harkens back to that time. And a lot of that stuff came from the fact that the mainstream media wasn't delivering on, there was a lot missing from what you saw in the mainstream media. So my first question to you is that what was missing that made you start Dime?
In one word, I would probably say it was an energy. There's a little clip that we'll show in a bit, and it's an interview that I did recently with Mississippi Tourism. And they were sort of wanting to promote, after sort of a rough spring for us, public relation-wise, as a state, they wanted to show that we are a very diverse community, statewide, artistically, creatively, population, demographics. And so as part of the interview, we were sort of talking about why Dime? Why was this necessary? There were plenty of publications here. And what I noticed looking out when I looked in print is there wasn't something that really captured the youth culture. I don't even know if I'm considered young anymore at 31, but there wasn't anything that just made me feel, looking at it the way that I feel internally, which is a bit chaotic and like there's not a good home for me sometimes. And so I wanted to see something that was colorful and not even just not photoshopped, but not so perfectly edited. If you've ever read Garden and Gun or seen it, it's a beautiful publication. I know there's been a lot of coverage of this part of the state in that magazine, and it's so well done. But it does not represent my experience here, which I feel it's just a little bit grittier. It's it's not perfect. It's not always lemonade on the porch. Sometimes it's crazy. And so I just didn't feel like there was something speaking to people who had those same sort of feelings, and also when it came to just our art life, our culture here, there wasn't something that sort of summarized that. And we started looking around, getting ready to produce this, just to make sure we hadn't missed anything. And we could find little underground publications in different pockets. You guys might have some here in Oxford, but we couldn't find anything that represented a statewide at a glance. Mm-hmm. And so that was actually one of the most important parts of the magazine, which our art director, who lays the whole thing out cover to cover, Casey Rowell, she would never get on the stage. She is incredibly shy, like a lot of artists. And she said, why don't we put a calendar on the inside that would sort of summarize everything that's going on across the South, and we'll call it the big ass calendar, and we'll put it in the middle, and it'll be a tear out, every single time. Mm-hmm. And I was like, that's a great idea. Can we afford to do that? Mm-hmm. And she made it work. And so the back of it has always featured either a Mississippi artist or someone who just completely engaged us. And it's been such a big hit, we could never lose it. So
that's been a
we had not seen that before. Mm-hmm. And mentioning zines, it wasn't something that I grew up with necessarily, but there were online versions of that. And in Hattiesburg, there's a little bagel shop downtown that had something called the Brown Bag News, which was a big point of inspiration to me when I was in journalism school. It came out once a week, and it was handwritten. There was one copy on a brown bag, and it had these little fold-out pieces that were like jokes and just interactive things going on. I was like, this is fantastic. Like, I want to read this every time. Of course, it had been like spilled on and like cream cheese on it, and everything kind of got gross. But it was, a jumping off point. I was like, this is something fresh, and I can touch it and interact with it. And I guess I've just always loved the print. We could have gone to the web, but we really wanted to have it be something you could pick up and take with you.
Well, then you've answered my next question, which was going to be, so why print when it's so easy to just do web. It's not as costly and all that, but you've kind of answered that question already. But why Dime? What's the name Dime?
Oy. I wish it was a cooler story, and it's really not. We were sitting in a room with the staff of our sister publication, which is a weekly newspaper based out of Jones County, very different in dynamic from our publication, and so a lot of people in the room they wouldn't even consider themselves millennials, and we were like, what are we going to call this thing? And I had some ideas. I wanted to call it Virtue, which I thought was going to be ironic, and then someone else wanted to call it Unplugged, and I was like, no, sir, we cannot. And so we just could not come to any kind of an agreement. And a guy who had nothing to do with the meeting walked in. He was like, what about Dime? And he had no idea about like the pop cultural references that, that's a girl who was a 10. He did not know that, or any of the other references either. And so we're like, yes, I love it. It has a great mouthfeel, and we went with it. We just needed to like settle the argument and move on, and it worked out. So
Memorable and easy.
we need to come up with a better story, though.
Yeah, we're going to just make one up for the next talk.
I didn't actually know that. How many people knew that Dime actually referred to a 10? I'd never heard that. Oh, you did? Yeah.
So
These are awesome students. That's great. I feel very
it's a song. I'll send you. I
uninformed.
mean, it's a few songs. I'll send you a link.
I'm feeling very out of touch. So now, how does your well, I'm going to skip ahead actually. So I'll go back to your comments about the Visit Mississippi and the sort of PR moment, and how geographically determined is Dime? Like, could you do this magazine? Could it exist anywhere else?
I don't think so. I don't think it's as important if we were in Austin or Nashville, we would just be like in a sea of other publications kind of doing the same thing. But in Mississippi, because there wasn't that voice already, we need it. We have kind of a self-esteem issue here, and everybody is probably trying to leave when they graduate. Right? I was. Everybody is probably making plans to go to their next 1 million plus population city. And I hope that works out for you, and at some point that you do get to experience that if you haven't already. But I hope you come back, and want to build something here. And the secret is that if you are interested in doing that, you totally can, because it's an incredibly affordable and accessible place to do something in the creative field. And this is the perfect example of that. The fact that we just turned a year old, would have been a miracle somewhere like Nashville. It wouldn't have happened, honestly, but we were able to make it work with the team of people that we had access to. And we haven't even met everybody yet. There's so much more creative potential that can get involved with us.
Yeah.
So,
so what has the feedback? Obviously, you've made it to your first year mark. You've had what seems like an incredible response. You drop off. You have 20,000 is your circulation, and then and I'm guessing your online is maybe comparable to that. I don't know what your.
We're building the online right now. So we started publishing that in March. We kind of stayed away from it at one point. We were sort of like staunchly, we're in print. Go find us. Go out, get out of your house, get away from the screen. Go find us. But then we realized, let's be practical about this, and also there were some advantages to being able to open up an iPad or an iPhone and click and get more information, or buy tickets for a concert directly out of the magazine. So, you can be in a coffee house, reading it online, have the experience of the story, and then say, okay, now I'm going to go and see this artist perform. So it's kind of a full circle, circle part.
I was going to ask, so Sarah, you are the marketing person, and
Yes.
you're doing, so one of the things that you guys do, I think, is that you're actually putting on events, or you're participating in events, right, or partnering with people, and sort of a creative approach. You're not just this product, right? You're
Right.
sort of a whole, I hate using, it's a brand, right? But I just try to stay away from certain little buzzwords, but that is, right? You're building a whole brand around that. So
Yes.
can you tell us a little bit about how that works, and also just what that is? I noticed when we came in, a former class had a little quiz, and it was like, what's your brand persona? And I'd be curious to hear that. I'd be curious to hear if you guys think in terms of that, or.
Dime is still you know, we are Dime, and we're still establishing like what we participate in and what we do for ourselves and for our readers, and what we kind of like what we would do as an execution of events. But when partnering with events all over the state, oh my goodness,
Oh, yeah. That's It's okay. You can just hang on to it. And then, there you go.
okay.
Your hand, you know what it is? It's that.
It's your hair,
You can
I
leave
think.
it here and you talk. Yeah, just, I think it's,
Okay.
hold that hand. You can talk with your left hand, but not your
Okay.
right.
Okay. This is new. The left hand is new. But if it's interesting and if it's compelling and if it's different enough we have to be interested in it to even participate.
Right.
And then we just have to kind of see, you know, what we think our readers would be interested in. For example, we're partnering with Oxford Film Festival for 2017, and it's because we thought that's what we would be interested in doing. And so when it comes to like partnering with events, you know, it's kind of
It
cross
happens
promotion.
organically.
It happens organically for the most part, because we never are consulted by people that are like, we want you to promote us, and we not sit down and think about it and say, is this really who we are or what we would do for ourselves? And so it kind of stems off of that, and we work with some really great people on that as well.
We've got a small staff. I mean, we're 5 people, and so at the end of the day, the things that we can go to, we have to really want to be there, you know. And except for maybe me and one other, everyone else is in their 20s, and you know, I mean, there's a lot of things they're not interested in, and that's totally fine. And so, you know, we want to know that we can have their full participation. We went to Fringe Fest here about a month ago, and it was so much fun to see that event going on. So we like things that are weird. We know that we're all kind of weird. Like, we enjoy stuff that's very offbeat, you know, not that we couldn't go to something more traditional, but we'd really feel out of place. So we try to resonate with
And the more
with
traditional
alternative.
things we feel have been done by other people. And
It's covered.
Yeah, it's covered. We want to do
Right.
something new and something different and something unique that people might actually not know about, but would be really interested in going to. So
Right. So what's can you give an example of a story that you've done that was maybe, you know, off the radar, but you guys are the ones covering that for sort of your audience? Can you think of something?
Let's see. Okay. Coming up, we are working on, I'll give you a theme that we're working on. So it's advanced knowledge. Don't go like around and tell our competitors or whatever. So one of our photographers, her name is Kate Dearman. She's incredibly talented. She just graduated from USM in December, and she moved to Nashville instantly, like as you do. And then she got out there and was hired right off the bat to work for a firm and given like a staff of people underneath her. It was an incredible job in a fantastic city, right? And so she kept getting these assignments or these photo opportunities to work with Instagram celebrities who wanted her to shoot their real life, but it was all staged. And so they wanted these quaint little settings, like we're gonna go in the woods and have a picnic, and it's gonna be like this glamping-esque thing that we're just doing on a Tuesday afternoon. And it was so bogus that she was like, I can't hang with this, like I have to go home now. Like, Nashville is not what I thought it was, and now I'm part of the problem. So she tells us this story, and I was like, could you give us like a photo assignment that kind of expresses how sometimes social media and real life are so distant that it's actually hurtful? And she did. She shot this beautiful image. And then we decided, let's make that the theme of our November issue, real versus fake, you know, and so kind of express that. And that's a thing that, you know, I feel pretty confident saying there's probably not, a student publication could certainly talk about that and probably already has, you know, but in a magazine, we haven't seen it in Mississippi. And I want to know like how that experience is specifically happening here in our state, because one of the things that we do well as Garden and Gun shows is lovely vignettes in the South. For some reason, we're really great at that. But then you back away from the vignette and it's like held together by duct tape. And that's I don't know, we want to show all of that.
the duct tape.
Yes.
That is a very interesting. There actually used to be a zine called Fake Authenticity, which I'll have to dig out of the archives.
Yeah.
But it's a great theme. I mean, it's got tons of potential for, I'm sure. But
Awesome.
one thing that's making me think of is that I often have students who are, they'll have huge Instagram followings, or they're fashion bloggers. Is there anybody in here who actually is ever, or they're sponsored, or they have, they have a huge following, and they get approached by people to just say, okay, we're going to send you a pair of boots, and so that's a really interesting gray area that gets grayer all the time, especially with the social media stuff. So maybe you could speak to that.
Yes. I love advertising so much.
Okay.
Like a subject that I'm really fascinated with, because the world revolves around advertising, and if you don't know that, then you're blind. And so what Dime tries to, we have advertising, that's what subsidizes our magazine, but at the end of the day, we're not, people, the stories, like if we were to do like an advertorial, it has to be something that we sit down and we're like, yes, you know what, our readers, we would have done the story anyway.
Right.
And we kind of create it as part of a package for them, and we give it a new angle if it's already been done. Because, if Jackie said this in the very beginning, if we're not authentic, then our readers will identify that, and then
I'll
they
sniff
won't.
it out in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
People can tell when it's not authentic.
Is there an example of something that you wrestled with, like that you were like, well, wait, is this us? Or, and maybe it was 2 of you in the office, and then 3 of you were like, it's not me, I'm not, have you?
We have these conversations a lot, actually,
time.
because, Sarah is such a great rep. She meets a lot of people who are like, we want coverage of this thing. And we have had moments where we're like, it's not only a fit, but it would be kind of abusive to the attention span that we have. And that's the thing we have to think about a lot, is that I know my attention span, and I know the current general state of attention span, and it ain't much. And so, we don't want to be abusive. Well, this is 84 pages. That is a lot to take in for anyone. Like, this is something that you could read over the course of the fall if you wanted to. So there have been times where, I don't want to call anybody out, any business out specifically, where we really had to evaluate it. And I know on the coast one time we took a chance on an event that was sort of brand new, and we were a little bit concerned, like, we don't even know who they're going to book yet. Like, what if these bands are just so generic that we're like, okay, our name's going to be on that banner. And now I'm starting to sound like a snob, but that is not the case with this publication. We want to be open, and so we were like, you know what? We have to take this chance on them, because when we were getting started in October of last year, everyone who gave us dollars for advertising was taking a chance on us. We were selling a magazine from a photo of what the cover was supposed to look like, and a conversation about what you would like for this magazine to be. And so we were actually able to go to print with the dollars raised purely based on air and a picture.
Yeah.
So we're like,
Give and
we
take.
had to take that chance, and they killed it. They had a great event. They're going to end up doing it, annually. That relationship is sealed. But we could have passed on them, and then we would have missed out on a great opportunity.
There's a little bit of a leap of faith.
Yes.
Yeah.
But we couldn't do it to everyone that came to us, because, with my job being out in the field every day, the most asked question is, will you do a story on me? And it's like, here's Jackie's email. Like, don't talk to me about stories unless you want to talk about, have the advertising conversation as well, because I'd be happy to promote your event and take the editorial content part back to my editor and see if she'd be interested. But as far as that goes, I don't make any decisions that way.
So you do have a pretty clear separation of.
We try.
We try to give her at least a buffer. She may have that face, and then she'll come to me and say, look, I think this would be worth it, And I'm like, I trust your judgment completely. You're our audience, and you've been here from from the beginning. So, but as far as, journalism goes and sort of the ethics and everything, like journalism majors, who are you here? By the way, I'm just curious, like, show. Okay, so a lot of times you do have that conversation about like keeping the advertising world entirely separate, and that might have been a possibility when staffs for publications were like 40 people,
Right.
and again we're 5, and that we got to pay our bills,
Right.
and so
It's not as
really, yeah, we do have to consider that.
One thing that I find in that conversation too, and especially now, because it used to be called advertorial back in the day, right? Where you had like, complimentary copy. One page over here was the ad, and one page over here was the editorial content. And now online, it's even tighter, right? It's so tied in. And there's a lot of hand-wringing about it, and especially in academic circles. But it's funny to me because I think, especially like giving young people a little bit more credit for being savvy media consumers and knowing.
Right.
Getting it and possibly not caring. But I wish they cared a little more than sometimes, like, do you really want those shoes, like, tracking you around all over the web, like that one pair. Like, don't you care about privacy at all? No. But, it is an interesting conversation, I think, because a lot of times it's sort of this whole, like, oh, what's happening with native advertising? And I'm like, I think young people get it and know they're in the commercial, and they're okay with that half the time.
We have crossed this really weird threshold where when I opened my first email address, which is that embarrassing one, right, with probably some digits or something in it, and then like as you got older and you could be offered a credit card when you went to a store, you'd be like, okay, I'm going to give you this email address, and you had to whisper it because it was embarrassing. And that was your junk mail account, and that may not be a thing. But now the marketing is savvy enough that I want to get that email from Rachel Zoe. Like, I want to get, because I like the way that it's presented. I don't mind it. And there's plenty of time wasters out there. There's more than there's not. But when there is good content, I don't mind being marketed to as long as they are respectful of the things I'm interested in.
Right.
And so we try to have that mindset with the magazine, but the beautiful thing about it is it's still print, and if you don't like what you see, you can close it.
Yeah.
And hopefully you can give us feedback, on that. But yeah, that's what's nice is that you're not gonna, like you do when you launch off of a Pinterest thing, you're not gonna accidentally tap to an ad in our magazine, So we're a little bit
Very
less
clear.
obnoxious that way.
So what about that crossover then between the print and the online? Like you say, you had like a 6-month sort of head start with the print. What have some of the challenges been to sort of, migrate and trying to do both too?
It is tricky. It's reaching a point now where if we had the means to, we would probably hire another person to make that their sole focus.
Right.
And so we're working with a couple of interns right now, and we always do, for the record, keep about 2 interns. So but it is in Hattiesburg. And so we try to figure out ways to provide content online that is separate but equal. In other words, it's not exactly what you would see in the magazine, or it might be like a supplement to it. When we first got started with story assignments, we really had no idea what we were doing, and so we would say, all right, give us 1,500 words. And you would put that in print, and it would be a disaster. And so really, the ideal story is really like 650 or 700, which can be quite a challenge to get the gist of a thing in there, but otherwise, the reader has walked away. And so sometimes we do have to leave that as a jumping off point. Go to the web for more information. If this really does interest you, go there. And that's where we're living right now. But the next phase of our web presence is going to be content that isn't even in the magazine at all. We might end up having a page saying, go to Dime Online for these things, and that's the only mention you will get. Mm-hmm. It's hard because, this is the baby, this is the first child, so web is always going to be sort of second, but I know that just with the demands of readership, eventually that's what advertisers want to know about as well.
Right.
What's your web presence, what's your foot traffic there?
So what's the feedback from the advertisers? Like, what are they really happy to see this great print product? Are they,
It's touch and go. Most of the time, like 98% of the time, it's kind of like a breath of fresh air. It's not, it's traditional advertising, but the content's not traditional. And they feel like because it's so different, then their ad will be seen because people are tired of, as far as like print goes, around us, they've been around forever. And so they just feel like, especially with targeting millennials, which is our target market, it's kind of lost with print. They're not, picking up other publications. Not Oxford, but in other places, because y'all have some really fantastic publications here that also target millennials. But as far as, they just kind of, everyone is Facebook advertising. Everyone and their mom is Facebook advertising. And so, Facebook kind of gets dull for me as a consumer and as a user of social media. I'm just like so tired of Facebook being just one big, commercial. And so that's really the feedback that I get from my advertisers. And they also really enjoy the content. It's compelling. They say that it's well written. And that's really nice for them to be a part of that. And also we can make, their ad can be a little bit more edgy and different. And we go back and forth with them until they're happy with it. But it can, say whatever they want and they won't get in trouble for it, or people will think it's funny and then they'll go in. They can be a little bit riskier with us because, that's kind of what we call for sometimes.
That would be a good tagline. Dime, you won't get in trouble.
You won't get in trouble. We'll get in trouble.
We'll get in trouble.
We'll get in trouble.
So
No,
I'll
we
ask you just a couple more questions before I let these guys ask some. But one of them was, who are your sort of, the spirit guides? Like, who are the things that I don't know that their magazines exist that you were kind of looking to. It doesn't have to be a magazine. Like, it could be something else. But if there's other things, sort of cultural products out there that you've looked to and thought, we want to be like that.
We talked about this before we came.
Yeah, well, so we use Issue to distribute our online edition, and after you start using that for a little while or have a presence there, it starts to tell you, like, if you're reading Dime, you might also like this. And it made our life when Native out of Nashville started popping up there, because that was one of our big muses that's also close enough to us that you can go and pick up their monthly print, and they've got the digital online as well. You should definitely check it out. It's a beautiful publication.
Is it also about music or just culture?
It is music, food, drink, all of the above, basically, all the good ways to spend your money. And so they cover that. And then, but before, we didn't actually know about Native when we were getting very first started. I came to the art director and I brought in a copy of Nylon and Fader and Vibe, and I said, can we merge these things together, and so of course, and we talked about this, the product that we end up putting out, and the art director would say the same thing, we are never satisfied with it. We are always like, Casey and I especially, get it out of our site, because we've obsessed over it for this length of time, and then we're like, okay, we learned a lot about this, we're going to figure out how to make this, and this better. So do I think we're hitting the fader mark? No, by no means, but we wanted that to be a guide for us, and our publisher was actually kind enough to send me to New York and sit down with the publisher of Spin magazine from back in the day, which he came from publishing royalty. His father was the publisher of Penthouse magazine. And so we sat down and had dinner, and I was terrified. I mean, that was like the equivalent of me meeting the most important person in my industry, as far as I was concerned. And he told me a lot of things that were extremely valuable. And then we got back together about 6 months later, after we had been in print, and he told me some things that were also extremely valuable, and he told me a lot of things that I didn't agree with anymore. And I realized he's not our demographic. He's in his 60s. And it was just interesting to feel like, he was a muse, but now I'm like,
Moved past it.
Yeah, that's weird, but.
I liked, you said something when we talked earlier, and you said, the deadline always wins. We're never going to be happy at that moment, but you've got to let it go at that point. And I thought, gosh, that's such I love that term. I'm like, that's true. The deadline always wins, and if you didn't have one, you would never finish something, right?
Right.
So,
I feel bad for sculptors, because they can always go back and edit their piece. They could walk by and be like, I'm going to put a piece of gum on this, just to give it something extra. And what are you going to do? Yeah. It's done. It's out in the universe now, and in a way it's very, if you're a perfectionist, which I'm really not, but if you are a perfectionist, it is, it's something you have to you come to grips with it, and you're like, okay, this is probably good for me, There's some battles that I'm like, all right, we had long conversations about the Oxford comma in the beginning, and things like that, minor things, but overall we want it to stay true. So even when it's imperfect, I think that's kind of accurate for our generation.
Let me let some folks here ask questions if they, one of my last questions, you said you hire interns, but I'm guessing that a lot of folks are always looking for, possible venues to pitch stories or to pitch ideas.
Yeah.
And you've said that you do accept those, right?
Yes.
Are you a paying magazine?
We are a paying magazine, absolutely. That was a very important thing to us. We wanted to try and find out what was competitive pay, which unfortunately in journalism, if that's what you're doing, you knew you were going to be broke. So it, but we try to be competitive with other publications. And yes, we do pay. It is based on experience. So if you're in school, that would be at a rate. Once you have your degree, that would be at a rate. And if you've been published for pay with some sort of history to that, that is also at a rate. We wanted to reward the degree and we wanted to reward the experience, but we didn't want to cut students out of the deal by any means because there's a lot of talented writers and photographers. You don't have to be based in Hattiesburg by any means. That's just where our physical office is. Actually, Zoe, can I say that you've... Zoe has written for us before and she's here, and I didn't get to meet her until today. So we do a lot of telecommuting or just, email introductions. When you reach out to us, if you do, and we'll stick around for contact things, please send us a sample of your work. Like, I love enthusiasm, but I can't really gauge anything from that. So please send us samples of your work, and if you have been published before, that's awesome. If you haven't been published before, go and get published. Maybe even before you talk to us, just so I can see, like, what did another editor do with this? That's helpful as well. So, and if you're not doing any of that, at least blog something. There's really no excuse not to, because it's free. So yeah, and have that as a starting point.
And sorry, can I add?
Please.
Okay, and specifically in Oxford, there's so many fantastic stories here that aren't being told just yet because we don't live here and we don't know them. And currently we have 2 Oxford contributors. So it would really be beneficial because we really want to have a well-rounded view of the state, specifically Oxford, because you'll have a fantastic art and music and food and, living community here. So
Yeah, definitely.
Lots of opportunity there.
tons.
Any questions from you all? Everyone's baseball hat.
Yes. The same name. So that was actually, I'm going to tell myself real bad. I was out one night at the Keg and Barrel in Hattiesburg, and I bumped into a friend who worked at something like the Launch Pad. If y'all are familiar with that in New Orleans, it's like a business incubator. He worked at a version of that, and he was telling me about all the people that were there. This was after we had already picked out our name and everything. And he was like, yeah, and we've got a publication called Dime. They're part of Uproxx, which is a big, I don't want to call them a conglomerate, but they're a big media corporation. And I was like, what? And so of course we did Google, but we were like, I don't know why. We were like, it's going to be fine, right? And so Uproxx is actually based, or this particular office was based out of New Orleans, and all of a sudden we got really, really terrified. We're like, we are actually Dime Entertainment Magazine, so that is our full legal name. And our publisher, we are trademarked, actually, and it turns out Dime Magazine is not. I hope that media law, don't talk to me. But we went through all the proper channels to make sure we were covered, and we'd be really flattered if Dime Magazine ever paid enough attention to concern themselves with us. But they actually put out a really nice publication too. I don't think they're in print anymore. I think they're just on the web. They were at one point, but I hope that's not who you thought you were coming to see today. And their name makes actually a lot more sense, right? Don't they flip a dime to start the games and see who gets to go first?
I'm going to miss
I
this
don't
reference too.
Yeah,
I'm not
I
gonna know.
think I'm assuming, so.
Yeah. But good question. Over here.
That's a really good question.
Can you,
Yes. I can.
Yeah.
For the first couple of months, you know, we were very artistic and we just kind of did and said and put out there whatever we wanted. And I mean, it was awesome and it was wonderful, but then we got a little bit of backlash because we were almost too raw. But now, you know, we've kind of taken a step back and reevaluated like who we are as a brand and as a magazine, and what can be appealing and yet not, you know, offensive in a way.
Right.
What can be, you know, what can we produce that's open-minded and wonderful and not, you know, make someone close it because we made them angry with what we said.
You know, and there are things that as a publication we will eventually have to talk about if we're going to continue to represent millennials in Mississippi that are going to be offensive to people no matter what. But as far what she's referring to, or a couple of things that she might be referring to, is we used to drop the F-bomb a lot. And that's just like one, for instance. And then we realized like that's not really necessary. There's a lot of shock value that goes into that might offend someone who even uses that in their language. And so we're like, let's just rein it in because it's almost distracting, you know, without purpose, which I'm starting to sound like Will Smith's grandmother. I think that's what he, like, they had that conversation when he was first becoming a rapper from Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. And she was like, no, you cannot have curse words in your rap. So that's what he did, you know, is he intentionally left it out, and I don't think it hurt him in his career at all. And so, yeah, I guess sometimes.
Good point. The idea of saying you don't want it to be more distracting than you believe in your content enough to not have to add.
Our content is fantastic, and it just didn't, you know, it doesn't need it most of the time. So,
we're very real about, or at least our expectations for the interaction with the publication. We know that if you've seen this before, if you have possibly seen it before today, and you did pick it up, it was because it was pretty. We're not expecting someone to automatically be like, oh, that's going to be intelligent, like, you know. But if you happen to sit down, it's sort of like, you know, we described it before as like a girl that you're like, she is really pretty, but like we are not expecting her to also be smart too, which is a terrible, you know. But it's where your mind goes a lot of times, and we want it to be a surprise that Dime, if she is a girl, is actually, you know, has some intelligent things to say. So.
So there was another hand up.
Studying how magazines balance between digital and print, and that being kind of a secondary consideration of y'all's, do y'all see a lot of revenue coming from digital in the future, and do you have from like that ad ratio online, or is that more you're making money from this and having extra content?
the great thing about Dime when we started was that we were kind of just open to, you know, as far as being shaped, we kind of left things open. We weren't exactly experienced in, you know, everything, and we had like a basis, but we can allow people to, you know, because we don't have any ads on the web. I mean, we have it on our digital version because it's the same thing as the magazine, so that's just kind of like a double whammy for the people who are advertising with us. But as far as like content or ads on our website,
yeah.
paid advertising, we haven't done it yet. I'm sure we're open to it.
It's definitely going to happen. We had Live Nation from their New Orleans office reached out to us a couple months ago, and it was a really hilarious conversation. You were not there that day, but we were in a conference call with their office, which is apparently run by two people, and the girl there said, you know, we went to your web presence and you guys really look like you know what you're doing, and we all just like silently chuckled like, oh my God, she did not say that, because we really all this time have had sort of no idea, and that's just being genuinely honest. We've been from the beginning sort of making up as we go along, and yeah, eventually we're going to have to sell ads online. Just to the expense of that is obviously less, so the gains can be much greater. But we really want this to be important. You know, we want it to be like a leisurely experience that you can have that's entirely different from this product here. And we've got some cool ideas coming up, thanks to some of our interns who are very in touch with things. We'll be doing some video series and all the things that you do when you have a web presence. But for now, you know, this has just kind of been the star. It'll happen, begrudgingly, but it'll happen online.
Is there another hand over this side? Oh, no, that was a hand up there.
do it. Just do it. Don't overthink it. This is something I've seen a lot with artists, and I don't consider myself an artist in any way. I'm what you'd call an artist groupie. I just want to like be in their aura and then like go home. Like I'm not. But I'd like to write about them. And so if you're interested in self-publishing, don't overthink it, because the first thing that you produce is going to be seen by like 5 people, including your family. Like no one is really going to hold that against you that it was bad. It's gonna be bad. Like we always say, like our first issue is our worst issue, and that was the promise that we made to everyone taking any kind of a chance on us. Before we ever delivered it, we're like, this is going to be our worst issue, but hopefully like it kind of impressed you a little bit, you know. And so every year is our like worst year. We're just going to keep getting better. But yeah, go ahead and do it. You know, I would ask you, like, what's the holdup? Yeah.
That's great. I was going to ask you this question also, was at your year birthday, was there anything that you guys could go back and sort of say, like, if you could talk to yourselves a year ago, is there a warning or a pep rally or any kind of like, don't, you know, here's what you wish you knew? Just a year
Sarah
ago.
probably would have wanted more training. We so threw her into the fire.
They gave me like half a day, and they were like, good luck, go do it. And I was like, all right. It took me like 3 months to really like understand what my job was.
So how did you figure it out? I mean, besides just your job, were you know, is there a YouTube video that says,
Oh no.
here's how to
Completely
go?
self-taught. But that's actually the best, you know, the best way to be, because everything I tell you and like the conversations that I have, because I'm a marketing person, and I mean, as soon as a salesperson walks in the door, you're automatically like, no thank you. Like when you get calls from telemarketers, like that's my job, and it's a really hard job. But if I go in there and, you know, speak to them, like I'm not trying, you know, I'm like having a hard time communicating this, but I really value people and what they're trying to do with their business, and so that way I can help them grow, and I know how Dime can help them grow, specifically business to business, and that's why I feel like I'm good at my job, because people can see that I actually care.
That you mean it.
That I mean it, and that maybe I don't make as many sales because I care a lot about each person individually. And like, you know, one of my clients had a baby last week, and you know, like I brought him a present and different things like that. I care about the person, and with training, that kind of just like gets kind of washed away. It's like go for the sale, go for the sale, go for the sale. You know.
Sarah's getting married in like 2 weeks, and she has like 4,000 people coming to her wedding because she's best friends with everyone. Like we really got so lucky having her join our team, because she's so enthusiastic, and she brings you the information, and then like you're a part of her fold now, you know, like she knows what's going on with you and vice versa.
You're going to be
And
selling
so-
ads as you pass out wedding cake.
That's the actual intention of the wedding.
Sponsored.
So sponsored
Oh.
by Dime Entertainment. I wish it was sponsored by Dime.
Right, yeah.
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about that.
Make that happen, Jim.
So now, I think we've covered a lot of the things that I had asked, but two things. One thing that I was very charmed by was when we first talked, and you said, I talked to my mom about this thing that I'm doing, and I was like, oh, I love that, even though the sort of ethos and also the point of the talk is bossing yourself and being your own boss, but it's still sometimes appropriate to ask your mother what's best, which I think
yeah.
was very.
You know, I didn't have to ask.
She volunteered.
She volunteered that information.
And did you? What was? I was just lost my.
I'm sorry.
No. I was thinking that. Well, just about that, about the bossing yourself, and about being. Was that a big part of the reason for doing this too? That you didn't, you know, you could have applied for a job at Fader or at, you know, Vibe or something, and then said, and then I'll go back and start my own. But instead, you just dove right in.
Well, you know, I am an employee at Dime. It's not my ownership. It's actually the paycheck that I receive where I'm not cutting it to myself, because that, as you mentioned in those things, I have other businesses that I do. And so in some cases, it's really nice to be a part of a team where there's a structure there. I've been self-employed prior to the point of working for Dime for the last 6 years. So it was definitely a dynamic shift. I used to like wake up just naturally whenever I felt like it, and now it's like you've got to be at a place at a time, get it together. But Yeah, I'm still, by the nature of us being so small and our publisher being so open and trusting of each of us individually to do our jobs, we each sort of have different roles within the job. So we do have to be very independent and self-monitored. I mean, there's a lot of times where, now that Sarah is in Tupelo, because she started on the Gulf Coast, that we won't see her for 2 or 3 weeks at a time. We check in, you know, consistently.
Very like self-directed.
We have, but you know, I know that for both of our reps, it can be very isolating. So they have to be very shored up personally. And me as well, we have to know that even when we have really hard days, the content's just not working, no one's hitting deadline, or she's getting a lot of no's, as can happen, that, you know, we're gonna keep moving forward, it's gonna be okay. We have to give ourselves little pep talks when we go out the door, you know. And so I think probably being independent prior to this point made that possible. You know, unfortunately, we landed upon 2 very strong young women who brought that energy and personal independence to the jobs when we hired them.
So did you bring the concept, I think I glossed over this, but did you bring that concept to a publisher, and that was how that worked? So
It
you
happened at a
actually-
bar one night, and I bumped into the guy who had actually, our publisher's name is Jim Sigelski, Gin Creek Publishing, and he loves trivia, so he was at this local bar, and I had not seen him in years, but he had hired me right out of college. I worked there for 8 months at his newspaper, his weekly newspaper, and I hated it. I hated news writing, I hated covering car accidents and pot busts and all the things. I was like, I'm not into this, goodbye, I'm going to nonprofit world. And so I hadn't seen him in a little while, and he told me he was looking to expand his business. And I was like, oh my gosh, I know what you need to do. You have money, so I'm gonna tell you this idea that I have, like just do this. And I really didn't have any expectations. You know, when I was telling this, I was like, what this state needs is some sort of statewide arts and entertainment magazine that's targeted towards young people who probably feel very isolated here in Mississippi because they're sort of artistic and weird, you know, but they aren't alone. There's definitely a home for them. They're just not being featured or talked about in print at all. Maybe as like a sideline, but not as a foreground. And hopefully that wasn't my pitch, because I can't remember exactly what I said, but anyway, he was like, okay, would you run it? And it all sounded like a big joke, and then like literally a few weeks later, he called me and he said, how quickly can you go to New York? And that's when he was like, go and meet Bob Guccione and do the, you know. So I guess that was his like skin in the game, his show of seriousness that he meant it. And things just escalated from there.
That's great.
So, yeah.
And like you said, one of the things that I find so refreshing about it is that the conversation about what Mississippi is, there's very fixed ideas about what Mississippi is, and this feels very much like that conversation has been, I mean, that conversation will never be resolved, but this feels like a piece of it has been resolved, and we're just moving past that, and it feels very refreshing. You mentioned a video, and I'll just play this really quickly, and so that you guys can see. Explore Hattiesburg, I'm realizing is, I've been saying it wrong all these years.
How have you been saying it?
Hattiesburg.
Oh,
Is that wrong?
Hattiesburg. You know, we got a lot of different pronunciations, but Hattie was a woman. She was actually the wife of the same guy who founded Gulfport as well, Captain Hardy, and his wife was Hattie. Hattie Hardy. And they had 3 daughters, Adeline, Mamie, and Corinne. And those are the 3 main streets in our downtown avenues. So it's very adorable.
I'm sorry.
My name is Jacqueline Lee, and I'm the editor of Dime Entertainment Magazine. I'm originally from Jackson. I was a photojournalism major at USM. Dime Entertainment Magazine is a statewide arts and entertainment publication. It is put together by millennials for millennials. We wanted to give them something that made them feel like they were reading a publication that could be from anywhere in the United States, but it spoke to them specifically as Mississippians. I think what's moving Mississippi forward is undoubtedly the arts. What I'm starting to see with Dive Magazine is that the businesses we thought we were going to be going after to be involved with us are all arts-based, whether that's a craft beer brewery or whether it's a graphic design studio. At the end of the day, what's really making this a unique place is the smaller businesses, and most of those are run by artists. Because we have the university here, we have a lot of diversity coming into Hattiesburg. We have students from across the world, actually, that come and either perform here in our symphony or are part of our international studies program. And I think that's led to a really interesting mix of people from all different backgrounds, all different skill sets. There are people from all over here that have made this home. Being able to go to a show at the Thirsty Hippo downtown and be able to, even come here in T-Bones and watch a performance on the weekends. It's just always something entertaining going on here. So it's really nice to see the community rally around entrepreneurs here in town. That's really exciting to see, that you could start off your career in the arts. You could be a painter, not really expecting, to make a living from this, and actually open a gallery, and that gallery be, something that brings you your livelihood. And I think there's starting to be a trend towards that. People are finally claiming their passions as their actual careers, and it's pretty empowering to watch.
Well, that was like a weird way to end live. Thank you. But thank you. But seriously, thank you guys so much for doing such a great job representing and putting this together. It's been very exciting to discover you all. So, and thank you for being here today.